Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of the Telnet Show. It's just us today, your hosts. We have the fabulous Kirsha Fox. She's the author of the Deception and Justice series, homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
And my co host is Julia J.K. Allen. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything us. Tonight, our guests are Julia J.K. Allen and Kirsha Fox.
Yes, it's our 100th episode, so we're doing a special show just to celebrate that. Yes, we're very excited.
All right. So, Julia, can you tell us about your writing journey? What made you want to be a writer, and how did you get started writing?
Yes. So actually, I started writing after I learned how to write because I said to myself, like, what do I do with this cool new skill I have? So I wrote a fairy tale about a princess and illustrated it and everything. But I didn't know that I like wanted to be a writer. I didn't really consider writing as like a option for like to do as a job until college when I discovered that I could study creative writing under my English program. So that's what really got me to be like, yes, I've been writing my whole life. Let's see what we can do with this skill.
Mm-hmm. And what made you gravitate towards horror and magic?
Yeah, so I've always been kind of fascinated with magic, and like when I read my first fantasy story, it kind of like opened this whole new world to me of what's possible in the realms of writing and stuff. And so I really love magic and kind of sprinkling it into everything, even when it's not necessarily expected to be in the story. Challenge that somebody dared me to do. They were like, "What's one genre you feel like you can't write?" Because I was super
Mm-hmm.
blocked and I was completely stuck and I didn't have any ideas to write anything. And so I said, "Oh, horror," because I'm such a chicken that I love watching scary movies and stuff, but I'm like I could never write something that was like scary for other people. And so um, they challenged me, they kind of dared me to write a horror story, and I had so much fun just with like the thought experiment of how do I make this scary for somebody else. So it just was
Mm-hmm.
such a fun challenge that I kind of really went with that.
Found out it was fun, huh?
Yes, I know.
Right. For you, what would you say is the most important part of writing?
To me, it's definitely going to be characters, or yes, for me, it's characters because, like, one, that's like what the reader falls in love with and really feels connected to in the story is going to be characters. And that's kind of the funnest part for me, too, is getting to know my characters and what's happening. I also feel like, you ideal world, you have a great plot as well. But for me, the characters is really like where I put a lot of like my kind of focus on because they will also like knowing your characters well will tell you what the plot is going to be in certain decisions of like what the character would choose faced with whatever dilemma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you get stuck, you're like, well, if I were this person, what would I do? And they guide you forward.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's always kind of knowing character motivations really helps me figure out what the plot is going to be as well.
What does your writing process look like? How do you go from like idea to finished draft?
Yes. So I start with character sketches and light plotting. I like to figure out kind of like the action, at least that's going to happen, the main action that's going to happen in every chapter. I also like to figure out my goals for writing. So before I sit down to write anything, I will sit and make a plan for like I'm going to develop this relationship between these two characters, or I'm going to do put this plot device in, foreshadow this. As long as I have an idea of what I'm doing when I sit down to write, then I'm not just staring at the page like with existential dread, being like, what's going
Yes.
on here? Yeah, so that really helps me is having a goal to view when I sit down to writing. But I don't outline and plot quite as heavily as some people do. Some people will go down sentence by sentence and break it down in their outline. Fully, I don't quite go that far. I like to do a little bit of discovering as I
Hmm. Nice balance of both.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I gotta stop doing the long ums.
Oh
I've noticed
no,
that
you're
a lot.
fine.
Who have been your favorite authors growing up and the
Yes.
ones that perhaps influenced you the most?
Yes. So, funnily enough, my favorite author I didn't discover, I want to say, until college. When was, I saw Pride and Prejudice, the Focus feature, the Focus film feature, and then fell in love with this story and needed to know more. Read the book. Book was even more amazing, and so that's been my favorite author. Other favorite authors I have are going to be like Shakespeare. I could read Shakespeare. I know it's kind of the nerd in me could read Shakespeare anytime, because just the fun he has with the language, the inventiveness, the phrasing, it's so good. And then let's see, who else was my favorite author growing up? I remember more books than authors growing up. For like elementary school, like I really loved reading Little Women. Like I read that in
Mhm,
fifth grade and just was like, oh, broke my heart, but also like such a good story. In middle school, I kind of got more into like horror with like the Goosebumps, Stephen King. But I also read a lot of classics in middle school. I think I was kind of really proud of the fact that I had a high reading level. And
mhm.
so like reading like For Whom the Bell Tolls, stuff like that, obviously, just reading as much as I could as a kid. It was kind of my thing. Um, but I will say, specifically because I mentioned For Whom the Bell Tolls, there's a lot of criticisms I have of that book, even though it is canonical literature. It really has a lot of like wonderful language in it. I think Hemingway had a way with words. I think Hemingway also had a problematic view of a lot of women. However, after reading that
Yeah.
book, that's my big criticism is, yeah, he calls the female character is, she calls her Rabbit because she's kind of meek and submissive and scared, and it's just kind of like uh but but let's see, getting back, I'm so sorry, I'm really brain dead today, so I'm kind of like long-winded and rambling.
Mhm,
Shakespeare, Jane Austen, some of my favorite writers. As far as, I'm trying to think if there's any like more like fun or contemporary authors. I really enjoy Brandon Sanderson's stuff usually as well. Yeah. So I'm like not just all canon reading over here. I do read for fun too.
yes. Those are all really excellent choices. The funny thing about Louisa May Alcott is that in my house we had a copy not of Little Women but Little Men. So I read that one
Oh.
first. So I got to know Jo
Mm.
March in this more motherly role, and it was only later on that I read what I considered to be her prequel, Little Women.
Oh yeah, that is
So
so interesting.
so knowing who her true love was kind of a spoiler, but at the time, like, I didn't really think about it that way. I was like, "Oh, of course she
Mm.
doesn't end up with him," like,
See,
he's
that's where I was kind of like, oh, why didn't she end up with him though? Because I bought the love story hook, line, and sinker of being like they were perfect for each other. But I also understand the appeal of like mysterious older man that comes in and sweeps you off your feet, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how you read them differently when you know certain things ahead of time.
yeah,
I was like, "Oh, he's
yeah.
far too brotherly. He's far too, like, not suited to her particular tastes," and, it made total sense to
Mm.
me, but everyone else is like, "What happened?" Like, "What happened to
Right.
our
Well,
precious
yeah.
romance?" That was all set up.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just like, yeah, I think part of it is too that it's like stand conventionally she would have fallen in love with him
Mhm.
if this was
She
any other book.
she
I
was
think that's part of
unconventional.
the heartbreak of her not choosing him. But yeah, I do understand she's a very independent woman. She's also not going to do something just because it's expected of her. And so I really understood her making the decision she did. It just kind of felt like the Anna Green Gables thing with like how he always teased her, and she didn't kind of realize her feelings for him until much later. I thought I that's kind of where my mind was going with Joe and Lori, though, of being like, oh, it's just like Anne and Gilbert,
Mm-hmm.
but
Sort
they
of the
don't. They're
girl
not
next
enemies.
door
Yeah.
vibes. They grew up together. They developed together. Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Yes. All very good choices.
I guess the difference though that's most interesting though is that Anna Green Gables, she is very much like in love with the idea of romance and romantic things, and so like her wishing for an older man to come sweep her off her feet was kind of like the dream for her. But the more her, I think her journey or her lesson would have been to like pick Gilbert because like that is her soulmate and the love of her life. But she just had this idea that like romance has to be so different in like a storybook. Whereas Little Women, I feel like the message is kind of the opposite of like Joe, to be true to herself, would not do what's expected of her, I think.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree. It's a very
Okay.
interesting contrast between the two. Um,
hmm
all right. What is something that you learned from the writing process? Something that you didn't know when you first started out?
Oh, that the one thing that the message that's kind of stuck with me throughout from that I've learned from the writing process is that like you kind of have to, even if you think you know yourself, you have to try new things because you never know what's going to work better for you. That's
Mhm.
my writing process journey has been all about that because I thought for sure that I was a pantser. There was no way I could plot anything because if I plotted, then I don't know. I just felt like it took the joy of creating out of things.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until like I probably had like 6 or 7 starts to a novel that I was like super passionate about the idea, really loved the story, wrote probably 13 chapters in each one until I got writer's block because I didn't know what was happening next, let alone the end to get to the end. And so I had this bad habit of not finishing anything. And so for me, it was a lot of, okay, we got to finish. We've got to re-look at what our writing process is and try new things to see if we can come up with a better way and actually get to a finished product. And so I looked into plotting that was more free-flowing, more forgiving
Mhm.
than like the Roman numeral outline that we all learned in school and hated and dreaded.
Oh,
And so,
yes.
yeah, so I
So
started with like,
structured and formal, right?
yeah, I know, right? And then like has to be in like the perfect order and like, yeah, the formatting kills me every time. So I started with learning about the snowflake method by Randy Ingermanson, I think is his name, who came up with that. And I really enjoyed that it focused a lot on the character sketch as part of the plotting as well. So I always do, like I said, a loose outline with what happens in the chapters, and then the character sketches for like who each character is.
Mhm. Yes, I think both tools working together can be really helpful if one
Yeah,
isn't quite right, or like they make a whole picture for sure.
they do. And like I said, there was like a part of me that was so convinced I knew how I wrote best. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until I tried something new that I was like, oh no, this is actually how I feel like I write best.
If you could tell a new author one thing, what would it be?
I would tell a new author to sit with any feedback or edits that they get before they react to them, because as an editor, I know it is a lot when you get your manuscript back and you're so excited, then you just see a sea of comments and red marks and all of that stuff. So the best thing to do is, like I said, kind of sit with it before you react, because you're going to have big feelings and they're usually not going to be happy, fun feelings at first. But like I said, after we have a couple of days of absorbing and thinking about it, then we can kind of see what's valid about this feedback and what do I agree with, not agree with, and have a conversation about it. So to me, like I said, I think it's important though to just like have your emotional reaction, and sit with it, and then after a couple of days, like I said, you'll have more of a clear mind to sit and see like what is applicable, what is valid, where's that kernel of truth in this feedback versus blindly accepting or blindly rebuffing all feedback, because I feel like with new authors they kind of don't know that like a good where to land, as far as maybe they take on all the feedback and take that as like gospel truth and then change their entire story, or they don't want to take any of the feedback because they wrote the story the way they wanted to. And so
Mhm.
it's like that balance of finding, like I said, those kernels of truth, the wisdom in each little bit of feedback,
Mhm.
but staying true to your story at the same time, right? So
Mhm.
I always like to have, like I said, when I'm editing for people, a conversation of like, if you made this decision intentionally for a reason, like let's discuss why I think a different way might work for you better, or it's 100% your story at the end of the day though, so it's like up to you what you do with your story. Because I had an experience early on with my first book where I wrote the ending and then an editor told me that was like a horrible ending, it was too predictable, it was like it wasn't impactful in the way that I wanted it to be, and so I rewrote the ending. And then when I went to go get it published, they were like, "What is this ending? It doesn't make sense," because I had changed it to make an editor happy rather than sticking with what my story needed and what I felt was right. So that's my biggest advice: is just sit with the feedback, and then you'll be able to hopefully have like a clearer eye on what to keep and take.
I totally agree with that. I have seen it in myself and others that you get your criticisms back, and there's this defensive mechanism
Yeah.
in you of like, how dare you criticize my book, baby? Do you know how
I love
hard I've
your
worked
course
on
so
this?
much. Yeah.
This defensive reaction that is really
Yeah.
easy to get. On the flip side, sometimes you see it and you get down on yourself of, I am
Mm-hmm.
garbage. This is garbage. Look how awful it is. Look how badly I did. You might feel like you got a bad grade, because in
Mm-hmm.
school, if you got red marks, like obviously you got a bad grade. You did badly. You did poorly. And
Right.
you can kind of take it too personally. You can see it as a reflection of your own worth, of your own ability, of your own talent. You can see it as
Hmm.
judgment, and you absolutely cannot do that. You need to take a deep breath, maybe have a little cry,
Yes.
and
Yes.
but like don't like give yourselves time to adjust before you dive into the job of looking through the edits.
Yes, and keep in mind that unlike school, getting comments in the edits is not a negative thing. It
Yes,
doesn't mean you got it wrong, because like my whole thing as an editor is if I don't give you a sea of comments and stuff, then did I
you
even do
didn't do
my
your
job,
job.
right?
Yes.
Yes, yes. So like getting all those comments back is, like I said, to make it a good thing even better. Not It's not like, oh, you got all this wrong. So that's
Mhm.
important to keep in mind.
It is. It is. A good editor will not just fix your mistakes, but they will help you be better than you would have been
Yes.
before. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. How do you make time for writing?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't as much as I should. So I try to do writing sprints. I'm on a writing Discord that I try to do sprints with every now and then. So usually, if I have a project that's going on, I'll writing sprints is the best way for me to get words down. We had our fabulous writing trip last year that really
Mhm.
helped me get a lot of words done, and that was like really really amazing. So I try and do. For me, I found that like accountability of, like I said, word sprints where you're going with someone else and you have to tell them your word count at the end really really are good for me, because otherwise I just can procrastinate forever
Mhm.
doing the stuff that I
Yes.
need to do or want to do.
Having a community, having a buddy, having an accountability partner, setting aside time that
Mm,
is just for writing, like going on
yeah.
our writers retreat, which was so much fun, are
Mm,
all good ways to earmark time just for writing. Absolutely.
right. Right.
Do you have a least favorite part of writing?
Do I have a least favorite part of writing? Okay, so as an editor, this is going to sound really bad, but it is editing my own stuff though. I
Mhm.
love editing for other people because it's like a new story, first time I'm looking at it, fun, exciting, all that stuff. But when it's my story, like I've read it 100 times already, and I'm like, I tried to make it good the first time. What else do I do with this nonsense? So
Mhm.
I'd say that for me, editing my own stuff can be very very tricky because like I also do this thing where if I'm reading it, like I start reading it rather than like editing it when it's mine as
I you
well.
know I think it's that ADHD thing where, like, cleaning
Mhm.
someone else's house is so much fun. Cleaning
Right.
your own
No, and
house
that's
would be awful, it's the
I
worst.
know.
But
It
somebody
applies
else's
to
house
advice
with all their
too.
cool stuff,
Yes.
like, you haven't seen it before and, like, you feel
Mhm.
good about it and it's a service, and every time you find something, you're like, "Ha, I found you," like, you can't get away from
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
so much more fun. I used to joke about how we
Right.
should swap houses for cleaning, and in
We
the same way,
should.
editing
Yeah.
can be so much fun to swap manuscripts and go through each other's, words, and
Mhm.
it's so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely,
Mhm.
more fun to do other people's stuff than your own. Cause like, yeah,
Editing
that's
your own
definitely
stuff. You're like, "I read this 6 times in a row in the last week." You're so tired, your brain is
and
jelly.
I even do that with it, like I said, with advice, cause it's just,
Mhm.
like, my mess, stressful. I don't wanna think about my problems. Your problems, I will problem solve in a second and figure
Yes.
everything out because it's not my stress. Yeah.
Mhm. So earlier you mentioned how you would start a manuscript and get blocked, and in that
Mhm.
way, plotting actually helped you. Do you have any other advice for dealing with writer's block?
Yes. So I saw a particular exercise that I did that I had great success with. You take a minor character, like a really like a smaller character that doesn't have a point of view in your story, and give them right from their point of view. So it'll probably never make it into the book, but it kind of is a way of looking at things from a different angle and seeing the world from a different perspective, which can be really, really helpful. And so I recommend that of kind of like finding different ways to see the problem from another new perspective or
Mhm,
a new way of looking, a new angle of looking at things. The other thing that can be really helpful is giving your hands or yourself something to do while your mind can kind of meander and wander a little. So the dishes, crocheting, doodling, like these little things that we can do, laundry, where you're like kind of folding laundry, but your mind can kind of work on problems that you're having in your story that can be helpful. Or you have to ask yourself, like, is this a problem where I'm just burned out? I need a break. I need a rest. Or is this a problem where, like, maybe I haven't refilled my creativity in a while? Maybe I need to do something like consume stories, consume media, play a video game, listen to music, watch a show, different ways of getting stories in. Because, like, the easiest way to get inspired, I think, is to consume other stories.
mhm. I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. All right, what has been your most significant writing victory so far?
I'd say getting any story done, let alone novels, that has been like kind of what I'm most proud of as far as for
Mhm.
myself. Um, and yeah, just like the first time like my book came in and like I remember my mom was holding it and she goes, "Wow, you wrote this whole thing." Like that was such a cool feeling.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, that was
getting to
really
hold your
cool.
book,
Mhm.
having other people hold your book, just
Yeah,
crossing
there's
the
nothing
finish
quite
line.
like that.
Yeah,
Yes, I know.
yes. All right, what writing advice have you been given that you hate?
I hate the absolutes. So I hate and then the one that I really hate though is said is dead because said is not dead. Said is very neutral. Not that you can't use things besides said, but to be like said is dead, it's boring, nobody likes it. Like no, it's unobtrusive, so it won't pull the reader out of the story with like a glaring dialogue tag. Where sometimes some of the more colorful dialogue tags can kind of distract the reader.
Mhm.
Um, like intoned, you know what I mean? Like or just some of
Yes,
the ones
you
that they
wanna go
use.
for the accurate
Yeah.
dialogue tag,
Right.
and
You want to be
for the most
accurate and
part,
like
SAID is very
depending
good that for that.
Right, and depending on, like, the genre, there's different
Mhm,
conventions as well. So, like, if you're writing a middle school story, then, like, absolutely, the colorful dialogue tags is where it's at for those readers.
mhm.
But if you're writing, like, a serious thriller, crime, pace, something, then maybe we don't have, like, really if
In
it's a
that case,
serious
you
tone,
might
we don't have
actually
too many colorful ones.
drop a lot of dialogue tags, as many as you can in that
Yes.
instance, yes.
Yes, right. And then those things, pacing is so important that oftentimes, like, if it's clear who's talking, we don't have a tag at all.
Mhm,
So yeah, Set is Dead is one of the ones that drives me crazy just because it's like it's such a good unobtrusive, I should say, unobtrusive way to just delineate who's speaking.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Would you like to take
I
a
can.
moment and tell us about your books?
Sure. So I'll tell you guys about the scary story, short story compilation I wrote with my sister. So
Mhm.
she is an optometrist and has fallen in love with writing along the way. So what we did is we had a prompt for each story, and then we took it in our own direction. So there's kind of a pair for each story where you can see kind of the similarities between them because they're from the same prompt, but they're very different because they're written by very different people. And so that's kind of a fun thing to do. And there is like a bonus story that is in there. So lots and lots of reading you can get out of one compilation of horror short stories. And it is called This Side of Shadows by J.K. Allen and Carol Allen.
All right. Thank you so much. Where
Thank
can people learn more
you.
about you online?
So you can go to authorjkallen.com, or you can find me on social media. Let's see, I am hijinks writer on a lot of things for my books. So hijinks writer, or like I said, author jkallen.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now it's your turn. Turning the
Yay.
tables. Yes, yes. Tell us about your writing journey, what got you started, and what does it look like for you so
All right. I was thinking about this one because it didn't happen all at once. It was sort of a gradual thing where I loved reading so much that as a reaction, I am starting to envision my own stories. Most of it was
far?
like self-insert, a lot of the early books we read for school. Reading
Yeah.
these stories, I had to imagine what would I do if it were me in that scenario? What would I
Mm-hmm.
do if I were the Indian who wakes up in a cupboard? And
Mm-hmm.
or what would I do if I had a toy that came to life? For
Mm-hmm.
example. So a lot of it was considering the characters and did they react well and everything. And again, a lot of it was sort of self-insert fiction that I feel is a right of childhood of learning the stories and learning what makes a story come together. But by junior high, I was full swing writing. I was in a creative writing club. Um, and then during high school, I co-wrote a lot of stories with my friend about this world that we had created between us. And it had, lore and history and arcs and everything. But she and I kind of wanted to take it in different directions. And at some point,
Mm-hmm.
kind of had to part ways with it. And I
Mm-hmm.
started writing on my own. And I was a hobby writer pretty much for the rest of my life, mostly centering around like different D&D escapades.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wrote anything that I intended anyone else to read. It was just for me, just because it
Mm-hmm.
was fun. Until I wrote up a character sheet for a guy named Book. And Book was loud. Book was noisy. He told
Mm-hmm.
all of his stories, and he was just he came to me almost whole, like I didn't have to discover him the way that other characters have
Right.
discovered. And I started writing down his stories, and it clicked as I was looking down at what I'd written and thinking like, this is it. This is something that I
Mm-hmm.
can have other people read. This is a good story. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started writing, and it took me about 2 years to put his first book together, but that's what became Son of Deception.
Mm-hmm. And it's a fabulous story, by the way.
Thank
If
you.
anyone is wondering, it's the best. So you write adult fantasy. What made you choose that genre?
I have been a D&D player for most of my life, and it's a big joy for me. What draws me to that versus other genres, say science fiction or historical fiction, is I like magic a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I don't have enough of a background in science to do science fiction, nor do I have a large enough interest in history to do a historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I admire anyone who can do historical fiction. Like, that is so much research to get it
Right, it is.
accurate and stop from anachronisms. Whereas with fantasy, you have more of the world building. You decide the rules, you decide the
Mm-hmm.
systems, you decide the currency. What do they do to measure, what system do they
Mm-hmm.
use? What kind of technology do they have? And creating a world that feels lived in and cohesive and makes sense is kind of one of my joys.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is very, very true. World building is kind of the most fun
Hmm.
for a lot of people. Yeah. So,
Yeah, sorry.
what does your writing process look like? How do you go from idea to finished draft?
Um, for beginning ideas, I scribble quite a lot. I will take a page or a whiteboard and I'm drawing like stick figures and places, and I kind of write lines connecting the two. I go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, first, this guy like wants this. And to get there, he needs to do this and this and this and this. And I start kind of doing a really messy outline. And as I generate more ideas, I add them to the outline, and I might move some plot points around depending, or just cut them out altogether. I'm like, oh, you know what? That character wouldn't do that if that other person is here. And since they're there, they don't do that. So out it goes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a very amorphous sort of blobby outline for very well, right up until it's finished, honestly. I do not have just one method. It's just sort of whatever fits for whatever I'm trying to do at the moment. I have 1,000 notes open on my phone all the time. I'm constantly taking notes when I'm thinking of them. I have a notebook just for notes about the
Mm-hmm.
story to keep it all in one place because I lose things like crazy. But yeah, that
Yeah.
notebook goes with me everywhere. And it has a nice little pocket in it for pens, so I never lose my pens. So I can always write. Yes. Thank you for that. And,
Yeah.
yeah, I've learned to capture those thoughts whenever they come to me, be it the shower
Mm-hmm.
or if I'm driving. I can do the voice to text and say out loud what
Yeah.
the idea is. I can talk about it with friends. Like I'm just constantly, part of me always has one foot in that world, like just watching and
Mm-hmm.
waiting and thinking about what's going to happen. So yeah, after I put enough of the plot points together, I start writing and see where the story evolves, see where it comes to, where it comes to.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually it becomes a book.
Yes, yes. No, the important thing is always take those notes. Don't, if you tell yourself I will remember, you will not.
I'll not remember.
You will never
The
remember.
worst
You, no matter
is
how good the idea is.
when
Yes.
falling asleep and you're in that little like half dream state.
Right.
And the ideas are coming and you're like, that would make a good book, or that would make a good, part of like,
Yes.
you're having a dream that is related to your books. And you're like, oh man, I need to remember that. I've had dreams where in the dream I stop and write it down, and then I wake up and I wrote it inside the dream. It's
Ah,
good.
I did that once where
Yeah.
I used a phrase that made sense in my dream, but when I woke up, I was like, this is gibberish.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
was like, it was just gone. And I was like, oh, but
Mhm.
it was such a good story idea. But yeah, yeah, if
I
you
try
write it
not to
down,
feel too bad because for the
right.
most part, it is just nonsense that only made sense while you were in the dream. But
Well, the thing is you have all of the feelings and emotions in the dream that makes it make sense. Yeah,
yes,
to make it epic.
yes. But sometimes you wake up and it's still there and you jot it down really fast. So,
Yeah, yeah, those are the magic moments. What have you learned from the writing process?
chuck your pride out the door
Yeah.
was a big one. Because I thought my book was quite amazing, and letting other people read it kind of like was a big hit to my pride when they managed to find issues with it, issues that I didn't even quite realize. um so like if you we were talking about that a little bit when you answered the question, but if you allow your pride to get into the way, you will not grow as an author.
Mm-hmm.
um That's probably my biggest thing, and that just find people who will help you become better
Mm-hmm.
and learn to take their advice and learn when not to take their advice.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
No, and it's true that a lot of times if someone points out a problem, they're
Mhm.
usually right. If they point out how to fix it, they're usually
Mhm.
not right. But yeah,
Yes.
pointing out the problem can
Take
help.
the best parts from everyone. If you have a friend who loves dark romance and you don't write dark romance, they
Right.
can help you with like the morally gray villain or the hero.
Hmm.
They can help you with aspects, but they're going to try and steer you that direction. It's up to you to
Right,
decide
right.
how far, in that direction you want to
Yes. Yes.
go.
No, that
So
is very,
don't
very good
take
advice.
all the advice, but take the advice that works for you and your stories. Yeah.
No, that is great advice. If you had any other advice for a new author, what would it be?
Definitely find your people. Don't try to do it alone. The more groups you can join, Discords, Facebook groups,
Mm-hmm.
threads, TikTok communities, find a
Mm-hmm.
buddy, an accountability buddy, find your editors, your artists, you don't have to find them all at once before you get started, but as you
Right.
go, accumulate people that you can rely on, who understand your vision, who like you, who you vibe with.
Mm-hmm.
Get your crew together, because trying to do it alone is just really too hard.
Yes. So, where do you get your ideas and inspiration from?
Um, I pick up seeds of inspiration, I think, from everywhere. Someone will say something, and it can
Mhm.
be innocent and not even related at all to fiction, and I'll write it down and just hold on to it, and it might sprout a whole conversation between my characters.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that anime inspires a lot of my fight scenes. When I
Yeah.
write fight scenes, I'm thinking about like the anime and the scenes where you see the knife and the way that the action is turned and dynamic. And
Mhm.
so yeah, anime does that for like fight scenes and whatnot. Oh goodness. D&D of course is a huge influence. The monsters and the mix of all kinds of different folklores and legends and heroes, and it all comes together into one world. So while my world isn't Forgotten Realms or any other D&D based realm, it
Mm,
did very
mhm.
much inform in that sort of like it did inform on the universe that I created.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah, I take inspiration from everything. Music, shows, movies,
Yes.
real life. It's all inspiration.
It is. It is all good fodder.
Mhm.
Did you have a favorite author or book in elementary school, high school, and as an adult?
All right. Here's where I bring up Bruce Cavill.
Okay.
Um, when I was a kid, I was actually like really behind in reading and writing,
Mhm.
one of those kids that like gets the easier homework and because they're trying to catch you up to where you should be. So I believed that I wasn't a good writer. I believed that I didn't like reading. I believed that it was hard and, I wasn't good at it. And my teacher had a bookshelf and she had a whole bunch of Bruce Cavill books. And the first one was called My Teacher is an Alien.
I remember those. I love those books. Yes.
Yes. Yes, they were quite good, and one time I had some free time, and she's like, "Go grab a book and, sit down." So I did, and I was like, "Ugh, this one looks interesting." And I started reading it, and goodness, if I wasn't hooked, and it was a whole series. So I read the whole series.
Yes.
And after that, I found something that he wrote called The Unicorn Chronicles. So, like, I read that,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
I ran out of Bruce Cavill books. So I kept moving on. Catherine Called
Yes.
Birdie, all of the Indian the Cupboard books. Eventually, I found Animorphs and Brian Jakes. And
Mhm.
all of these series, I was absolutely insatiable for books after that.
Oh,
I
good.
read
Yeah. Yeah.
everything I got my hands on, every genre, adult, college, middle school, like everything,
Mhm.
appropriate or not.
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, through high school, I would definitely say that I focused a little bit more on like Orson Scott Card, very much like the Ender series, and then he wrote a lot of
Mhm.
like religious fiction that resonated with me at
Mhm.
the time. Pierce Anthony, eventually the Terrys, Terry Brooks, Terry
Yes.
Goodkind. um, what was the other Terry? I was always like, my authors are Terry. Like I just kept
Terry
moving on.
Pratchett.
Yeah, huh? Terry
Terry
Pratchett.
Pratchett.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you,
Okay.
Terry Pratchett. You know, the Stones, Shannara series and just everything, everything. I read everything. But those authors really meant a lot to me at the time when I found them. They really guided me forward along my writing journey.
Hmm. Wonderful. Yeah, some great, great actors, or not actors, authors in there. Sorry, great authors in there. Like I said, when you were talking about like the elementary school reading and falling in love with the Indian cover, and you're like, what are the other books that I read back then? I can't even think of. I immediately thought of My Teacher's an Alien. So it's
Yes,
so funny that you brought
yes.
that book up. Yeah. Oh my gosh, love that.
We had, Fudgemania was a huge one, and just like so many
Mm-hmm.
books, so many
Yes,
really
yes.
wonderful books. And the funny thing is like in reading, I didn't like my study habits didn't improve. But
Mm-hmm.
by high school, I was one of the best spellers. I was one of the best writers. I
Yes.
like intuitively understood how to use language without improving my study
Yes.
habits. All I had to do was read.
And I
So
think it's so true that they say, like, if you are not a reader, you just haven't found your book yet. Once
I
you find the book
completely
that
agree with
you
that.
love, you will be a reader. Yeah. But
Yes.
it's hard to find the right book for you because I
Mhm.
mean, we get told suggested reading in school is not it's not curated to make us want to read more. Yeah.
I don't believe so. And then I didn't particularly like the way that school taught reading. Um,
Hmm.
I think in 6th grade we were given Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh yeah.
And that was just like lovely stories. I absolutely loved it.
Mhm.
I took the book home and I read it that day, and I brought it back the
Mhm.
next day and gave it back to my teacher, and she's like, "What do you mean you read the whole book?" I was like, "I read the whole
Right.
book." I was like, "I really enjoyed it. You got more?" Like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
what she had planned was that we were going to read that book as a class for the next 4 weeks. Like the
Oh
out
goodness.
loud reading where you
Yeah.
listen to everyone and you all take turns reading a paragraph. And
Oh
I didn't
goodness,
have
no.
time. Who's got time for that? It was the most mind-dulling thing. It was
Well, you make
painful.
reading that's exciting, entertaining story, and you make it the least entertaining,
Yes,
exciting thing
yes.
possible with yeah.
So, I would count how many students were ahead of me, count down the paragraphs, mark it, and then I would read something else
Mhm,
under the
mhm.
desk until it was my turn, and it drove
Yeah,
her crazy, but part of me as an adult is like, "Why were you discouraging this?"
right, right. The extra reading, yeah.
Why are you discouraging this? Let her read, tell her what paragraph. I know it's annoying for
Yeah,
you. You have to
yeah,
do extra work, but like encourage that reading for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And then like
yeah.
Lord of the Flies, I understand as an adult that it was trying to teach us a lesson, but the way that we took 3 months to discuss Lord of the Flies
Mm,
was
mhm.
just agonizing. I was like, why do they
Yeah.
have to nitpick these books instead of just loving them, enjoying them? Like living them and
Mhm.
then going on. So, I think that if I had only relied on the school to teach me reading,
Yes.
I wouldn't have liked it.
No, not as much, not nearly as much. I don't think so
The
either.
the books that the schools choose tend to be grimmer and,
Mhm.
meant to teach you something instead of just l for the heck of it, or for the joy of it.
Yes, yes. So, being a busy mom, homeschooling mom of 4, how do you make time for writing?
I steal it. I
Yes.
sacrifice sleep. I use those little moments between projects, or just whenever I can.
Mhm.
Sometimes you find yourself with a few hours extra, or while you're putting down the baby, or you're thinking about your story as you're cooking dinner. It's just
Mhm.
sort of a constant thing where there's always a part of my mind that is thinking about this story and the characters and what's happening next. It's like a movie that I'm just always sort of watching in the back of my head.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Mhm.
stealing those moments in between.
Yes.
Yes,
Feeling those
yes.
moments to actually sit down and type them out. It is so easy to let other things get in the way of your
Mhm.
writing time, but for me, this is my time for me to have that
Yeah,
creative
yeah.
expression. And if I go too long without sitting down to write, I get depressed, I get
Mhm.
sluggish, I get sad. So writing for me
Yeah.
really is the greatest source of joy. So I
Yes.
owe it to my kids to give them a happy mom, and that means writing time.
No, that is so important that you have to like prioritize yourself so that you can then give to others. Yes, 100%
Mhm.
agree. Mom needs to have mom things. So, yeah. What is your favorite part of writing?
When it all comes together, when that plot clicks together, when something fits perfectly like a puzzle piece and it's almost like you
Yes,
anticipated the whole time. That's the
right. The
shattering.
dominoes falling into place.
Yes, when you stand back and you're like it came together. It worked.
Yes,
It makes sense. And people talk to you about, oh, the themes and how like they make you feel like you're an evil genius. And you're like, yes, yes, I am.
yes,
I
yes.
I put this together. It's really difficult when
Mm.
you're writing characters who are smarter than you,
Mhm.
but
Yes,
sometimes it
yes,
comes together and you feel it. Yes.
yes. How about a least favorite part of writing?
The first draft. The first
Mhm.
draft is so hard for me
Mhm.
because I'm having to, well, make it from nothing.
Mhm.
And I often deviate into areas and I have to pull back and go, no, that's wrong. Or I try it again. No, that's not right either. And I get closer and closer and closer. But it is really frustrating to rewrite the same thing a dozen times before you get it right. You
Right.
know, where you've read a chapter and like, nope, that never even happened now because it wasn't quite right. That character's not there anymore, you know. Um, so like in the last book I wrote, I ended up leaving a character alive who was supposed to die. And then I also incapacitated a character who was supposed to be there. So I did this flop, and now the rippling moments have just changed everything about this next book. So, yes, rough draft is my
Yes,
favorite.
yes. It can be very very tricky. Yeah.
Mhm.
What influences your writing?
I think the bits and pieces that I have taken from my own life and people I know
Mhm.
and my own experiences and the themes that I feel are very important to me. Um,
Mhm.
but I think I take little bits and seeds from everything that I come into contact with. Like the world is an
Yes.
endless source of inspiration. But as far as influences go, I think just the writers who I read, I
Mhm.
admire them and
Mhm.
I go, "Oh, wow, you did that really well. How can I do it
Yes.
more like you? How can I describe things the same like in a similar way? How can I
Mhm.
choreograph better? How can I reach deeper emotional depths the way that you do?" You
Right.
know? So I study the masters as the ones that the masters that I love.
Yes. No, and that is such a great way of improving our writing, reading like a writer. Yeah, yeah. And
Mhm,
we get to also enjoy books then too.
mhm.
Sorry, my dog's walking around making so much noise. All
Okay.
right. How do you deal with writer's block?
Um, there's a certain amount of crying. Uh, but the best thing for me has been finding someone who's willing to talk to me about my plots. Speaking out loud to a friend or my son or, just whoever will listen and talk to me about it. Oftentimes I discover the thing that I was missing just in explaining it to them. And sometimes people will throw ideas and I go, no, that's not it. But that does give me an idea for what it is. So talking it out with somebody or getting out like like a whiteboard to plot it out to myself, that's
Yes,
the best
yes.
thing.
Yes, no, I love a good soundboarding session. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
That's bouncing ideas off each other. I love the way you put it. Anyone who will listen. I was giggling about that.
Hmm.
All right. What has been your most significant writing victory so far?
There's a person who told me in a message that
Mhm.
I was her favorite author. Not favorite author this year, not favorite author that I've read recently. Like,
Mhm.
no, favorite author ever.
Yeah.
And I like that was really sweet, and I was like, well, surely that's going to be something that transfers to someone else pretty fast. Um,
Mhm.
it's hard to fight that imposter syndrome and to believe that
Yeah.
your books are any good at all. But
Yeah.
she has shared her books with my books with her friends. She has shared these books with her family members. She has shared these
Aw.
books with anyone who will give them a chance, who likes to
Yes.
read. And she's my number one fan, and
Yes.
I love her. But for me, the biggest victory was having someone who loved my books that much.
Yes. What a wonderful thing.
Yes,
Oh,
hopefully she's
that's
the
such a
first of
great
many.
feeling. Yes. What a wonderful thing. Your stories are that good. That's why.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yes. And then my favorite question: writing advice that you hate.
Writing advice that I hate. There was one book that I read
Mhm.
where they advised not using too much like flowery language. Instead of using scarlet, use red, or don't use azure,
Mm.
use blue. Try to use understandable, simple words.
Mhm.
And it's my opinion that you should use the precise word.
Yes, the best word you can.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
as someone who can name, several different colors and understand the gradients of difference between them.
Yes. They're all different. Yes.
Yes, for me,
Yeah.
telling me that a character is blonde doesn't tell me very much. No, let me know if
Mm.
they're a platinum blonde. Are they a honey wheat blonde? Are they a dirty blonde?
Right.
That changes
Right.
so much about how I picture them. And just that
Mm.
little bit of description can paint your story with such a more vivid brush than the more
No,
simple
100%.
words.
I tell everyone that I encounter that asks me about writing or anything when I'm tutoring and stuff. The two easiest ways to elevate your writing from basic to better: vary your sentences and then precise words. Pick the best word for the job. I 100% am
Yes,
100% behind
yes.
you on this. Like, yes, you
If the precise word is an
absolutely the
adverb, you
precise
use the
word.
adverb.
It's like a superpower because like that makes for impactful language when you really understand and get that perfect description of
Mhm,
something. Yes,
mhm.
no, no, 100%. We do not pick the most basic word for it. No. Oh my
Precision
god, I
of
hate that advice
language.
too. Yes.
Use
Oh my
the
gosh.
fewest amount of words that you need to get the message across. But,
No,
like,
concise. Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm 100% real. I'm ranting with you. Concise is brief, but also still comprehensive, including
Mhm,
everything it needs. So it's not just about cutting things
mhm.
down and making it bare bones dry.
No.
Which why would you want bare bones dry anyways?
No,
Like,
one of
but
my
yeah,
favorite authors will write a paragraph-long sentence.
yes,
And I do not want her to cut it down into
no,
smaller, simpler sentences. No, that is exactly what is needed for that character. That is what
mhm,
is
mhm,
needed
mhm.
for capturing the entirety of that idea. It is one
Yes,
sentence, one beautiful long sentence. So when I'm saying being
no, yeah,
concise, I don't mean bones. I mean
no,
make it
no,
what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
no, no. I 100% am on board with you with that because, like, yeah,
Mhm.
I hate that advice. Yeah,
Yes.
yes, we're not. No, because like I've complained about like the Hemingway app and stuff before, but it's just like
Mhm.
Hemingway, good author, never gonna
Mhm.
say he wasn't.
There is
But
no
at the
one way
same
to
time,
write.
variety is the spice of life. There are other
Yes.
ways, writing styles. We all don't have to write
Mhm.
super fifth grade level, nothing above. Like we can play. We can all have our own little
Yes.
play
Yes.
areas. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you succeeded in making my dreams come true. You gave me a horrible advice you hate, and now I'm like just as mad as you about it. So, mission accomplished. Yes, that was the
Thank
that's the
you.
answer I want to get for that question. It's just like, oh, let me get riled with you.
Mhm. Yes,
But
this particular
yeah,
book, I loved a lot of the advice in the book, but that was the
yeah,
one chapter I was like, "Maybe not.
maybe not.
This is not advice for me."
No, it's not advice for everyone. Yes. All right. So tell us a little bit about your books. so we can
All
find out
right.
more about them. Yes.
Gladly. All right. This is the Deception and Justice series. It begins with the Son of Deception. I kill these two main characters, and they wake up in coffins without their memories, and they have to earn a second chance at life. Sorry, I'm going to keep going. The second
Yes.
book deals a lot with they've got some of their memories back, and this character called Book is concerned that his murderer might try to kill him again.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a race against the clock. And then the third book is Keeper of the Demon's Skull. The other one was White Leaf Child. Um, Everything is kind of falling apart. All of their good plans, all of their work is falling apart and
Mhm.
not going the way they think it's going to go. And they have to find that strength within themselves to keep going and to keep trying to do
Mhm.
their best. So, but yes, this is adult fantasy and can be found on Amazon and where a lot of books are sold.
Yes. Do you have a website or any other socials you'd like to share?
Yes, I am at Kirsha Fox basically on most social medias, and there's also KirshaFox.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this was our 100th episode. Yay! We're
Yes.
so glad that we've been here for as long as we have. Thanks to everyone listening along at home and supporting us in other ways. So thank you so much
Yes.
for
Thank
joining
you
us
for
for
those
our 100th
listeners.
episode. Yes, and thank
And
you,
thank you
listeners.
especially to Terry Irwin.
Yes,
Who
yes.
has
He
probably watched
is our
every single episode and
knight
liked
in
every
shining
single post.
armor. Yes,
Yes.
and he's great about liking and commenting as
Hmm.
well. What
But
he was a
special
wonderful
shout
guest
out
to
to
have.
him. Yeah.
Yes, so thank you for watching along at home, and our season finale comes out next. So remember, there's more than one way up the mountain, and our next episode airs Friday. If you're interested in being a guest on the Tell Not Show, you can find us on social media, the Tell Not Show, or email us at the Tell Not Show at gmail.com. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at KirshaFox.com. Thanks and see you next time.